It's definitely feeling like winter. So you've got an idea for a film, but you don't know how to get started. Well, this is my insider's guide to getting your film made, whether you have a budget or whether you don't. I know not everyone wants to make a zero budget film, and I know everyone who does have some funds wishes that they had more. And the way I see it is, if you're waiting for a budget to come along to give you permission to go and make something, then you may never make it. So today we're going to explore those early steps and just make sure that something comes of this brilliant idea you have to make a short film. I'm going to talk you through what to do before you start writing a script or a treatment and how to plan your entire production. I was recently invited along to give a talk at Scottish Screenwriters, which is a monthly meetup where people will read an excerpt of your script out loud and allow you to hear the words off the page and get some constructive feedback. I had the pleasure of reading at 2 table reads, and they were so much fun. And the people who brought scripts along were brimming with ideas and feedback and inspiration at the end of each session. I was invited to talk after the table reads took place, and initially I was just going to get up and talk about what Cinora is and does. And I did do that, but I was also very inspired on the night to talk about how to get a short film project off the ground and how to make something with zero budget. And so this is how the idea for this video came around. When I have an idea for a short film, I always start by scribbling down all of the ideas that I've had around it. So what's the core concept and what are the little shoot-offs from that? It doesn't have to be fully formed. It could just be Paris syndrome, or a fish out of water, or a drinking game with a twist. Or you actually might have a fully fleshed idea and it's just about getting that out on the page. And then you want to just keep drawing concepts into that core. Vibes, inspiration, character traits, moments, real life anecdotes, films that are similar, styles that suit the story. I also start a Pinterest board in order to collect visuals that I think fit with the idea. And both of these, the map that you've drawn and the Pinterest or any other kind of form of getting your ideas down in one place, can evolve and grow over time. It can be adaptable as the film develops. But it's important to do this early on because this is a moment where your film is an abstract concept and not something that tangibly has to be made. And so the things that you jot down, no matter how abstract they are really useful for you later on in the process when you're trying to problem solve something or figure out how you get a character to do something in a scene or what their motivation is, how they would tackle this problem. Those things might be in your initial ideas and you just have to go back to that place and look through what it was that compelled you to tell the story in the first place in order to find the inspiration for the next step. Before you jump into writing a script, it's a really good idea to have an outline. And even if you're making a documentary where you won't have a script per se, it's still really useful to have an outline. You can do this in a number of ways, but I've found using either story beats or story circles extremely useful. Story beats are where you write out the simplest version of your film in bullet points, beat by beat. So, character gets inspired by looking at art of Sisyphus. The character paints her own Sisyphus and is happy with it. The character is told her art is good, but artists don't make money when they're still alive. And so on. This allows you to see at a glance how each moment of the film flows together. And the creators of South Park have a really interesting take on how to make sure things are flowing.
Each individual scene has to work as a kind of funny sketch. You don't want one scene that's just like, well, what was the point of that scene? We've found out this really simple rule that maybe you guys have all heard before, but it took us a long time to learn it. But we can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're f***ed, basically. You got something pretty boring. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but, right? So what I'm saying is that you come up with an idea and it's like, okay, this happens, right? And then this happens. No, it should be this happens and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens. And that, as soon as we are able to, and literally sometimes we'll write it out to make sure we're doing it. We'll have our beats and we'll say, okay, this happened, but then this happens, and that affects this, and that does to that, and that's why you get a show that feels like, okay, this to that, to this to that, but this, here's the complication, to that. And there's so many scripts we read from new writers and things that we see.
God, I see movies.
And
You see movies that you're just watching. It's like this happened, and then this happens, and then this happens. That's when you're in a movie, just going, "What the am I watching this movie for?" And just like this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. That's not a movie, you know. That's not a story. Like Trey said, it's those two, but because therefore that gives you the causation between each beat, and that makes that's a story.
You can also use story circles where basically 8 points of every story are laid out in a circle like this. And your main character goes on a journey around this circle in the film. Now, that doesn't mean that they actually have to physically go on a journey in the film. They go on an emotional journey. They may not even leave the actual location that they're in. You establish the main character in the world as it is before the story begins. Then you show the audience that they need something, courage, a brain to go home, something like that. Then there's the inciting incident that makes the character go on a journey to fulfill that need. And this is all in Act 1. Then in Act 2, your hero searches for that fulfillment, usually having to work out how to get it along the way. Sometimes they think they've got their fulfillment, but they haven't really. And either way, they have to change emotionally in order to enter Act 3. This is where they face their most emotional and sometimes physical challenge of the film, fulfilling the need they had and returning to the origin as a changed human. Or thing. It's crazy how many stories fit this structure, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. But what this does is forces you to understand on a deep level your character's emotional needs and how to fulfill them. This is also true of documentary, and although they're not as planned as a fiction film, there is still a direction at the start of every documentary that a filmmaker seeks to fulfill. So this year I was interested in making a documentary about the graffiti scene in Glasgow, and so I looked into who's involved in that and what kind of things are happening in the community, and it turns out there is some council action around forming legal walls. There's events happening where members of the public are allowed to come along and spray paint. There's different opinions on should street art be legalised or not. Even from within the community, some people don't believe that it should be everyone's given right to graffiti walls. The more I got to know the characters within that space, and by characters I mean the real people out there graffitiing in Glasgow, the more I understood what compelled them emotionally and what kind of arcs were going on in their real life. And that's what I can use for my outline. That's what I can basically set up to chase in a documentary and hope that I'm going to get an emotional arc similar to what we find in a story circle. There are more than those two ways to form a story structure, but I think those are some really good jumping off points, and you can look up others. There is no right and wrong. A lot of people are a little bit paralyzed by choice, and honestly, it's worth just picking one, giving it a try, seeing if it works for you, and if you feel like you're not getting anywhere with your story on that particular method, try another one and see if that works for you. So a couple of questions that came up at the Scottish Screenwriters meetup were, how do you find people to work on your film? And there was a lot of people who talked about when they try and put call-outs online for people to come and work for free, they're met with a lot of backlash, and I completely understand why. Sometimes these spaces are a place where people who really need to pay the bills are finding paid work, and they don't like it when someone comes in looking for free labour to help them get a passion project off the ground. And it's not the best thing for them to meet that request with hostility, but I almost understand where it's coming from and why that happens. I'm not saying that it's okay for people to be so nasty, but they're trying to keep certain spaces as paid-only spaces. And so if you come across that, understand that that's what that's for. There are lots of spaces online where you can find and employ freelancers and you can build a crew because you have a big budget to do so. But not everybody is there, and people are just really looking for someone to come on board and help them make their dream come alive. And we all have to start somewhere. And I also, like I've mentioned before, have this feeling that if you don't just go for it and be creative for creativity's sake, then you might never get the opportunity to make anything. You've got to learn somehow, and you've also got to try stuff out. And so I think it's okay to ask people, hey, would you like to come and do a collaboration with me? We'll make something fun and see what happens. That's perfectly fine to me. I think there's a difference between companies that have a lot of money who are looking for people to work for free for them, and then individuals who are just looking for creative collaboration. But what I did say was that the best place to meet people is at events like Scottish Screenwriters or film festivals or any networking event, any meetup. Basically, you can scope out quite quickly if someone is eager to work on something and cut their teeth and develop their skills, or if someone is well established and is only looking for connections with people who can move them on to the next level. So I think it's very valuable to be there in person, swap cards with someone, let them know where you're at and what you're interested in doing, and let them tell you that too. And you'll slowly begin to build a bigger picture of, oh, if I needed an actor for something, I think I could ask them. I do think that the people you're looking for are out there. It's just perhaps more difficult when you're working for free because you've got to make sure the other person is on that wavelength. But if you have been looking and you've been shot down, don't let that put you off. There are people out there who are happy to work together and collaborate. And I honestly think the only way that you can get better is to practice. So you may as well find the people that you work well with and practice as much as you can. The best thing to do is to introduce yourself, learn a little bit about the other person and what stage they're at in this journey. Is it their full-blown career, or is it something that they're dabbling in? And try to match people who are at your skill level, or maybe slightly above, but are willing to still help out with people at your level. And honestly, it's very important that you have good rapport with the people you're making a film with. So go off of vibes when you're picking who should be on set. Because honestly, it's going to be a much better process if you feel comfortable and you trust the people around you and you can have a bit of fun at the same time. Then you have all of these people with incredible skills and experience, but none of you are speaking the same language and you're all over the place and not feeling comfortable enough to just do what you're there to do. Another thing I would say, and if you are going to advertise for unpaid work, it's a good idea to note this, but you should provide catering for everybody when you're asking them to work for free. Not only does this keep people fed, which is a fundamental need of everybody's life, but it goes a long way to boost morale and keep energy levels up. And honestly, a handful of pizzas or some things from Aldi. I personally went to one of those Greggs where you can buy like 20 sausage rolls for £5 and just got loads and loads of stuff and made sure there was more than enough to keep people happy. And honestly, it goes such a long way to keep your crew going on set. And also, don't ask people to volunteer too much of their time. Remember that everybody has bills to pay. Everybody has other things going on in their life. They have friends, they have family. And committing to your film is a huge favour to you, no matter how much you cater them, or even if you cover travel. But basically, whenever I've worked on a project like this, I've only asked people to give up 1 or 2 days at a time. So if it's a longer shoot, I'll say, okay, we're going to do a weekend here, then we're going to have a gap, then another weekend, then a gap. And this just means that people can easily slot it into their life around their day job and around everything else that they've got going on. It doesn't feel like a major intrusion. And I let people know far in advance when those weekends were going to be and how they were going to look. And then I've also made films where I knew that I could do this in a really short space and time. So I asked people for 1 or 2 days and I scheduled the hell out of that project to make sure that it would fit into that time frame. And the thing is that people are more likely to come on board if they think, this is going to be good for me, and also I don't have to give that much. One day is all you're looking for. And that means that everybody gets to get all the creativity out and onto film and then move on with their lives. And further down the line, that creativity comes back to them in the form of a beautiful film. The next thing I do to get my film off the ground is I create a game plan. This is a spreadsheet that tracks everything throughout development, pre-production, production, post-production, and distribution. And this is seriously the key to getting the project going, because I always feel that if you can see the plan ahead and the steps that it takes to get to the end goal, it's way easier to follow through on the plan. Now, I was going to go through this and do a tutorial on how to use it, but I've decided that I want to do that as a separate video so that it's more accessible. And if anybody is using the game plan, they'll be able to see the tutorial on its own very clearly. I built the game plan up over the last few years whilst I've been making short films, and I've used this on documentaries as well as fiction, and I've shared it with people and got feedback, and it's an accumulation of all the things that you need in order to make your film happen. I really like having that all in one place, and it makes it so much easier for people that you're bringing onto your project to see everything all in one place as well. Please keep your eyes out for a video specifically about the short film game plan, where I will talk you through all the stages and how to make your production start happening. So I am all for a bit of practice. I think it's a great idea to do some test shots, even if they're at home. It's great to go to locations and scout them out, take pictures and imagine what it's going to be like to film there, and have table reads, whether that's with Scottish screenwriters or whether you just invite your friends over and say, hey, could you all read a part in my script? Trust me, that would be a lot of fun. All of this practice will help you shape and form the film, because you'll begin to spot what things are and aren't working, what people respond really well to, or what things just logistically don't make sense. And the more you rehearse and practice before you get to the set, the better. Because basically, eventually, all of the problems that come up, you'll already know how to solve them. People will know exactly what it is they need to do when they get to set, and you'll know exactly what it is you want from people when they get to set. To go back to the table read as an example, I actually did this once for a short film that I made because I had the time and facility to get the cast together and go through the script together. And it was a wonderful experience. This was when I was shooting Medusa in Italy, and I am going to bring that film out very soon on this channel, so you'll get to see the whole thing eventually. But basically, the table read allowed me to hear the words on the page said out loud by the people I was asking to speak them. And some of the dialogue that I had written made sense in my head, but when people said it out loud, it came across differently, or didn't hit the same, or it tripped them up. So we workshopped through the dialogue to make it flow more naturally, and given that it was quite an international cast, I wanted everyone to feel comfortable with how they were to speak. And actually, in the end, my cast came up with some amazing lines of dialogue and some really fun quirks that they brought to their characters and injected into the film that made it so much stronger and funner. So hopefully today's video has given you some inspiration to go out and make a short film. These are the beginning steps. Of course, there is so much more work to do once you've kicked things off. But I always find that when I have a plan laid out in front of me, I'm so much more likely to follow through on it than if I feel like the goal is really far away and there's lots of things to do on the way there and I don't even know where to begin.